Happy Friday, family. Happy Friday. We're going to give you a moment and let you come in the room. I can guarantee you we're going to have a moment of affirmation, celebration. We're celebrating life, you know. So please like and share the video, you know, to help us with the algorithm. This will be saved for WRFG Radio before I introduce our special guest this afternoon or this morning. It's probably afternoon somewhere in the world.
It's 400 years now and over. All them superpower try to invade Africa.
Well, this is some theme music, man. This is some theme music.
And the greed. But don't care how they try, they still can't succeed. Yes, they kill and they keep killing. But the more that they kill, the more they see coming. And if they try and they can't make it with Africans. They just back up the bag and they come to the land. Why? The more Africans they come down. The more Africans they come. The more warriors that they kill. The more they see coming. They kill Zulu. They kill Zulu. They kill Kosi. They kill Sansi. Matambele. The more warriors that they come down.
Dr. Leroy Castile. Presente. The man said the more Africans they gone down, the more Africans come. And we get to find out that's not just a lyric and a song, that's historical reality.
So easy. Zimbabwe and Angola already.
Live.
Namibia and South Africa around the corner. Yes,
we have plenty reason to celebrate.
Hiroshima. And they're getting Japan to surrender. And in 200 years, red out on the reservation. But for 400 years, they still pass up New Africa. The more warriors they come down. The more warriors we come. The more warriors that they kill.
Indeed. The more Africans they gone down, is the more Africans come. That's how the thing said. Family, give thanks for the moment. We're grateful for you joining us live, and those of you who would check this recording. We know it's a busy Friday for many of you. And as we said, I want to repeat, just in case you thought you heard me wrong, we have so much to celebrate, and this is a moment that we're going to focus on the celebration of life as we reflect on our long revolutionary journey. The brother Nipsey Hussle, Neighborhood Nip, said something that was such a profound statement. It's so simple and so profound. The marathon continues, you know, and I know our special guest this morning can attest to that. He can attribute to that. He can bear witness to that as a historian, as well as one who is participating actively in the revolutionary process. Talking about someone I've known since I was a little child. In the introduction, in the announcement we made, described him as a professor. He's definitely that, a political activist. Absolutely that. He's a father. He's a son of the soil. And I was thinking as we're getting ready to go on, he's actually also a veteran journalist. If you want to check out, I'll just do a shameless plug, some of his old school stuff, you know, Carib Nation TV. You'll get some jewels. You'll get some jewels in terms of chronicling the story, the story of our people, the culture of our people, you know. So without any further ado, I could keep on going, introducing him and talking about many of his accomplishments, but we're going to let this conversation be the introduction. For those of you who don't know, our beloved Dr. David Hinds. Jambo Ndugu.
Jambo, brother Kofi.
Si
Thank you for
Campo.
joining. Thank you for joining us today.
You're
I can,
welcome. It's always a pleasure to be on with you.
yeah, man. I can imagine it's a busy time for you. You're at home in Guyana, right?
Yes, I am in Guyana as I do every year at this time. I come
Cool.
home to be with the soil,
All right,
and the salt of the soil, the
all right.
people who make our journey possible and make
Mm,
the perpetual revolution possible.
true, true. Well, to you and the rest of the family, we say all the best for the season, and we're looking forward to having this discussion with you for many reasons. Even before the events that have transpired in the last 72 hours, as I was preparing for the show, I reflected that just even in the last 2 or 3 days, every human life is precious and significant, And then, it's my belief that the creator, the master architect, uses the lives of people who are in the public eye as an example, as a means of gauging our own lives, not in terms of comparison of who got what, but in terms of, looking at the human experience, because life is a reflection, life is a mirror. So even in terms of culture, we saw the transition of a young man, Bob Marley's grandson, Joe Mercer Marley, the son of Stephen Marley, you know, um, who has, in his little, very short career, left a lasting impact. Then we saw the transition 2 days ago of the great mighty Stalin, who is a living, as an icon, who, as I found out, I learned some things I didn't even know about him even a couple of days ago, speaking to Brother Aku Matota of Trinago, of Trinidad, in terms of Stalin's contribution to the art form of Calypso, and especially his political presence, and how the National Joint Action Committee utilized Stalin and many other people, but he was one of the first that they used in deliberate fusion of this voice of the people, this Calypsonian music, to infuse in a political struggle. And then yesterday we heard of the transition of Pele. Pele is not a musician, but again, another cultural icon whose presence in the world speaks so much to our people's journey. So I want to just ask you as we begin to just reflect on if you have any reflections on any of those people who I mentioned, or all of them.
Yes, thank you very much, Brother Kofi. Pele is giant,
Mm,
and he's a giant among giants. I would argue that Pele, Muhammad Ali, and Garfield Sobers, the cricketer from the West Indies,
mm,
are the three greatest sportsmen of the 20th century by sheer
mm,
skill. But more than skill, it is the meaning of their lives and their life's work individually, but also collectively. Collectively, that they were not just playing their individual sports, they turned the sporting arena into a contestation of politics and cultural liberation.
mm,
And so, therefore, as one speaks about the 20th century, and one speaks about the role of sport in the liberation struggle of mankind, humankind, but specifically the liberation struggle of Africans, then Pele, Muhammad Ali, and Garfield Sobers represent something that is epic in our life's experience. As a young man, when I began to follow soccer in the late 60s and the early 70s, I came into the era of Pele and Sobers and Muhammad Ali. And I have to say that my own personal life, but the life of my generation,
mm,
is certainly enriched by the exploits and the meaning of the sporting exploits of those three sons. They were all three of them,
sons of the working class. Very important. They were not just black, but they were sons of the working class, making their mark on a world that was not created for them as a people of color, but also a poor people. Pele coming out of the what we now call the ghettos, the favelas there in Brazil, and turning Brazil away from the white country that they were building, and saying to the world, but Africans are here too. Outside of Africa, there are 80 million of us here in Brazil, and we have something to say. I may not be able to say it in books or in poetry, but the poetry of my skill, my God-given skill, my ancestral skill, I'm saying to the world, we are here, 80 million of us in Brazil and in the rest of the diaspora, and of course in the motherland, making a mark for Africa and Africans, making a mark for poor people, and making a mark for the forgotten in the world.
Indeed. That's
and, yeah. And you know, let me turn to Black Stalin, who's near and dear to my heart. I am preparing now for my class this coming semester, Music as Political Discourse, Reggae, Calypso, and Hip Hop. And as I'm preparing for my class, I'm using some of Black Stalin's music, his lyrics. I'm using his tribute to Martin Luther King. I'm using his Caribbean Man, which is the calypso that he's best known for in the Caribbean. I am using isms and schisms, which is his reflection and evaluation of the Grenadian Revolution. I'm using More Come that you played at the beginning, because in that calypso, he speaks about the survival tradition among African people. He's speaking about defiance. He's speaking about hope. I'm using what I consider to be his praxis calypso, and that is Wait, Dorothy, Wait, in which he said people want him to sing about Dorothy and women and wine up on jam, and he doesn't have a problem with it. But until Mr. Divide in Trinidad divide the oil money equally, Dorothy will have to wait. Until Angola and Mozambique and South Africa and Zimbabwe are freed, Dorothy will have to wait. Until famine and hunger is wiped from the face of the earth, Dorothy will have to wait. Really profound, brother. I'm going to say this about Black Stallion. If the Mighty Sparrow and Kitchener, the grandfathers of Calypso, took Calypso to the mountaintop, to heights where it had never gone before, and I dare say may never go since then. If they took it to the mountaintop, Black Stalin gave Calypso its character. Its character. He gave Calypso its black African character. He gave Calypso its working class character. He gave Calypso its Caribbean character. He went deep. And I'm arguing here a couple of things. I'm arguing that Stalin, Duke, the mighty Duke, who is now deceased, Brother Valentino, who is still alive, the mighty Chogdos, who is still alive. The four of them who I call the Black Power Calypsonians, and you hinted at it. At their Calypso coincided with the Black Power Revolution in Trinidad in the late 60s and early 70s, in particular in 1970, with El Jack being the political organization. And that those four brothers took Calypso into the Black Power era. And they were able to spawn a generation of revolutionaries that pushed the Caribbean in a particular direction in the 70s and the 80s. And then I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that Stalin, along with Brother Bob Marley, Walter Rodney, and Vivian Richards, the four of them, using their individual arenas, they advance the Black tradition and the Caribbean radical tradition, the Black radical tradition and the Caribbean radical tradition, they advance it to enormous heights in the Caribbean. That without Marley and Stalin and Rodney and Vivian Richards, there would have been no Black Power movement. There would have been no Grenadian revolution. And so, as we give thanks to those brothers, when we look at collectively what they used their arenas to do, we are a richer people, a richer Black people, a richer Caribbean people, a richer working class people. We are denied the fruits of our labor still. But the dignity of labor, the dignity of those who fight against poverty every day, those who fight against capital every day, the dignity is intact because of people like the Black Stalin, Dr. Leroy Calise. And so as we say farewell to Brother Pele and Brother Stalin, we have to echo Stalin's own words that the Rastafarian, the great cultural revolutionary movement of the late 20th century, that influenced all of those brothers that I spoke about there, that Rastas are now in Grenada. You have Rastas now in Trinidad. You have Rastas in St. Lucia. You have Rastas in America. You have Rastas in England. And if the Rastafari movement is spreading, and the Caribbean leaders can't put it together for our integration, then there is something that them Rastas know that the politicians don't know. And that something is what Stalin sees as the thing that will push Caribbean integration and Pan-African integration and the integration of workers around the world. And that is, we come on the same ship from the same place. And all you have to do is to rap to your people and tell them we are one people. He's arguing there that it is not politics that moves the world. Politics derives from culture. He's arguing there for the centrality of culture in moving the human experience. He says all them big money speech that the politicians are making can't bring integration. You have to rap to your people and tell them like me, they come on the same ship from the same place. And you know, Eric Williams, former Prime Minister of Trinidad, himself a giant in the Pan-African world, sought to challenge Stalin. He said, Stalin, what about the Indian people? They didn't come on that ship. What about the Chinese people? They didn't come on that ship. And, you know, he was being, Eric Williams was being a practical politician, involved the other races, he would say. And Stalin said, no, I know what I am saying. Stalin was being philosophical. Eric Williams was being political. Stalin is arguing that our Caribbean, our new world, the centrality of that world is the experience of enslavement on that plantation for 400 years. And he's saying you have to start with that ship before you get to the other ships. Very profound, brother. Taking on one of the greatest intellect in the world. And I dare say, putting him in his rightful place. A peace to our brother, Leroy Calise, the Black Stallion.
I see. One of the things I want to say before we go further, every time I talk to you, you make me want to sign up for your class. I don't know if there's distance learning available, but you're teaching music as a political discourse. That's a class that I would definitely love to be in. I'd like to be a fly on the wall in that class there. There's
Yes,
so
the
many
students
ways you
tend
can
to
go
enjoy
into
it. Yes.
education, you know. But I was reflecting on just the you've already started that discourse in a clear way in terms of the marriage expression and revolutionary movements all over the world. It's been argued, you know, every revolution got to have its soundtrack. And if you study history from longer time, every army would march with their band, you know. So this is something that is not new to our experience. However, when you mention Grenada, we were talking the other day, you know, we were talking the other day about how some people have deemed revolutionary or painted revolutionary or painted the warriorhood, if you will, painted being freedom fighters as something that is serious. You have screw face, lips tight, you know, muscles tight, and I had no place for fun. You know, even as you mentioned how Stalin said, Dorothy, have to wait. That's clear because first things first. But Grenada, one of the lessons I, as a young man, learned from Grenada is how dangerous getting caught up in the paralysis of analysis is. You know, how ideological debate can paralyze a movement and even allow for the enemy of all of us to come in and find, you know, do what they do best, which is divide and rule. So as we're speaking today, I really would like to focus on the importance of culture in the serious, in the practical, in the bread and butter process of freeing the land. People all over the world, and especially now we're talking about the Caribbean. You're at home in Guyana. As a young boy, I remember people like yourself, people like Karen D'Souza, and others leading chants in the streets while marches were going on for bread and justice. And these were Rastafari chants, these were Congo chants. There's a fusion of all these different type of songs that would inspire the human spirit, right? So I would like to ask you to just start there. You know, just let's talk about, from your perspective, the importance of culture, the importance of musical and other cultural expression, even starting with the music in the very tangible process of liberation.
Kofi, you have said some profound things there. And as you were speaking, I reflected on, as you say, my own life. You know, you don't always watch yourself. You
Mm,
watch, you watch, you keep your eyes on the prize, not yourself. You watch the struggle, you watch your people. I was grateful to be born and to grow up in a piece of land, a piece of space called Buxton. That you were born there and you grew up there in the first part of your life. And there was something about the spirit of Africa, the spirit of revolution, always roaming that place. But it roamed the place not in revolutionaries clenching their fists. It roamed the space in the creative energies of the people.
mm,
The women in the marketplace, the men rowing their boats as they go into the back dam, and as they come out, you could see the poetry, you could see the defiance, you could see the deliberateness in what they were doing. It was a little village with 3 high schools, the most in any community in the English-speaking Caribbean. 3 high schools. What that meant was that education was central to life in that space. But education was not seen as reading and writing to get bright and become a big politician. Education was seen and was delivered as a cultural product. something to enrich their individual and collective lives. You mentioned at the beginning that the various things I've been involved. I am involved with, whether it's folk culture, journalism, political activism. I'm a professor, etc. And all of that comes out of that experience that I just there. Your own father, who played a pivotal role, he is all of those things and more. And so therefore, if you were growing up in that space and you're watching this man, who some people will attest to is more than a man, you're watching this gentle spirit walk in that land, he doesn't have to tell you be this and be that. His own life experience, influence, all of us, some of us, certainly influenced me to go in the directions that I have gone with my life. I have absolutely no regrets. We refer to a UC Guyana as a Renaissance man, and that may be the Western way of saying it. But what we are really saying, we are talking about an extraordinary human being, extraordinary not because he's better than others, but because he's able to absorb the energies. He's able to absorb the songs. He's able to absorb the rhythms. He's able to absorb the words floating in the air and take it, as he would say, refining it and giving it back to the people as cultural and political nourishment. That is the ideological thrust from which I come. And as we're talking about Stalin, I remember in 1987, when the Black Stalin sang a calypso that he won the championship with, called Bondem.
Yes,
Calling on St. Peter. He said, I'll be at the gate when Foster come. Bun him. I'll be at the gate when all those who've oppressed black people, bun them. And your father was holding a vigil because there was a shortage of gasoline and kerosene oil. And the gas stations were hoarding these things. Poor people were catching hell. And he went on one of his hunger strikes to protest against this. And the one journalist asked him for a comment, and he said, I want to tell the people that if the gas stations offend you, burn them. Oh my God, the president said, Mr. Quine is calling people to burn down the gas stations. And Mr. Quine was able to say, Black Stalin, I'm quoting from him, in which he said, all things that work against the interests of the human spirit, we must burn them. And I remember that caused so much uproar. Guyana is a student of the Calypso. White was a student of politics. Guyana saw culture, the word of those at the bottom, as setting the stage for the larger rhetoric. Desmond White didn't see that. A few years ago, he had me go back and search for Kitchener's 1963 hit, The Road Made to Walk on Carnival Day. And I said, but brother, you see, why you want me to go look for this? He said, I just want to know that my lyrics are correct and I am not misquoting Lord Kitchener. The road made to walk on Carnival Day. Constable, there's going to be big problem. It's going to be a long funeral from the Royal Hospital. Those were the days when you had this steel band clashes. And Kitchener captured that in The Road Make to Walk on Carnival Day, all this big fighting among the Bad Johns and the steel band, and the government want to ban road march and so on. Kitchener said, no, the road make to walk. The road, and I've heard Guyana use that. Certainly, a political activist, as they would say, but a political activist grounded in the culture that you were talking about just now. And this culture, not just song and dance, but it's a culture that comes out of the spirit. And it is the spirit. It is the spirit. So, you know, as I said yesterday, every day souls are passing away. Somebody's dying every day. The Christians teach us that. And our own folks, sisters and brothers from neighboring Annandale would say, Congo Creole, see them a go away, one by one. Congo Creole, see them a go away, one by one. And our Rastafarian brothers and sisters will say, fly away home. Fly away home. One bright morning, when your work is over, fly away home. The importance of our people attached to the process of dying and what it means for the larger community. The individual dies. We always wanted to go back to Africa. And we always want to swim back to Africa. The Rasta man said, one bright morning, when your work is over, you'll fly away home to Zion. Fly away home. You go back to where you came centuries ago across the Middle Passage. You go back there and lay your weary bones so that you can nurture those that Stalin is talking about in Morecambe. The Shudong, he talks about Walter Rodney and Patrice Lumumba in that song. He talks about all the revolutionaries. And as they lay down their weary bones, some little boy and little girl arises from the ashes of those bones to carry on our perpetual struggle to cleanse the human family of the dirt that is being inflicted on us. We are a cleaning and cleansing people. Our brother, the late Dick Gregory used to say, America is in trouble. It's nasty. Because when you're a little boy and you go out and play and your skin is dirty, your mother would bathe you, wash your face, dig out the boo-boo for your nose and your eyes, and clean you for the next day. America came out of slavery. The Western world came out of slavery, never washed itself. The stench, all it did was to put on new clothes. And so the act, the process of cleaning the world of the stench of enslavement and other forms of oppression is with the African. Lay down our weary bones when our work is over. We fly away not into the sunset, but fly away back to Africa, where life began, and to begin a new life, to begin new lives.
Ashe. So I want to go to Guyana and kind of have our year in review, if you will. It's been a very pivotal year, and I think that it's clear that 200 years from now, when people are studying the history of our country and the Caribbean in general, they will look at what has transpired in the last couple of years as very, again, pivotal in wherever things are going to go. But before we go there, I want to dig a little bit more on this culture thing. One of the things that we've seen, and as you mentioned, Dick Gregory, the old phrase come to mind, the old saying that when America sneezes, the Caribbean catch a cold. Even as we talk about Guyana and the rest of the Caribbean in terms of, one time you were on our show and you were speaking of the cultural imperialism, that has permeated our world in the 20th century. The Western cultural imperialism. So I want to talk now a little bit deeper about how culture is used, going back to the 70s, when I'm seeing you and Karen and Osase, who just walked on before us, and so many other people, as part of a cultural arm of a very clear and practical liberation struggle. Clearly, culture was used as a liberation tool. I'm thinking it was used very deliberately that way. I don't know if there was strategic meetings, planning, if there or if it was just the spirit moving at the time. I don't know how that looked. What I do know is that it says something about the profound impact that music has on the human spirit, because we're also seeing how hip hop music, you mentioned you speak about that in your course. Hip hop music has been weaponized. Dancehall music has been weaponized. They just, all accounts, I didn't see it this year. I haven't watched Sting in a long time, but Sting is the big dancehall show in Jamaica that happens on Boxing Day. And from all accounts, it was the most disgraceful. People asking, calling for Sting to be completely just canceled now. Completely, let's just move away from Sting as an event, But the whole premise in my heart is that, of course, we have music that is a healing force of the universe. It's a very fundamental part of the human experience. So it's been weaponized on both sides of the fence. Talk a little bit more about that, please, in terms of the weaponization of music, both how it's been used against us and again how we have used it for our liberation.
I think very good insight there, Brother Kofi, because we live in a dynamic world. We are islands in a deep sense, and so we don't have fences around our countries. We are poor countries, and so we don't have the capacity to defend what is in our land. And so therefore we are always exposed to the world. We are teaching the world. We are humanizing the world. We are turning former slave plantations where they bought people and sold people and killed people. We are humanizing those spaces. We are humanizing them with our own hands, our own labor. We're humanizing them with our cultural instincts and our cultural input. We are always humanizing the world which trampled upon us. But if must be humanized, there are those who think long term and realize the ultimate landing spot for that humanization is the African personality, which would seek to correct what has been crooked, will seek at the economic level and the political level to breathe new and fresh life. And so they turn our products into commodities. Just as they turned the bodies of our people for 400 years into commodities. They can no longer do that in legal ways, but legally they are turning the products of our liberation into commodities. And so, whether it's hip hop or reggae or calypso, they're turning those products into artifacts to be sold on the open market. And we know that the marketplace has no rules that recognize the sanctity of the spirit. And so what comes from the spirit, it destroys. And out of that destruction comes these products which we buy. The gangster rap, the dancehall reggae, the jam and wine calypso. They're artifacts. They're not the real thing. As Chuck Dust would say, it's not the real brandy. It's brandy mixed with water. More water than brandy. And so, my brother, we are in that constant fight. You make reference to when we were youngsters, Karen and myself and Osase and all the other cultural workers. We were the lead presenters on the platform. Walter Rodney and the Guyanas and the Rupnarines and others followed us. We set the stage because we were speaking to people in their own language. And we didn't plan it. But the Black Power revolution of the 70s had its central cultural component Because Black Power was arguing that the black man, the black woman is not better than other races of people. But we certainly were different. We bring something out of that experience that the world must be compelled and are compelled to listen to. And so therefore it was natural that if we were fighting for the liberation of ordinary people, if we were fighting to make the state into an entity that works in favor of our people, then we must do it in a language that they understand. The poet Lassana Kwesi from Trinidad said, you got to hear with the ears of the people. You got to speak with the voice of the people. You got to think with the minds of the people. And that's what we were saying at the street corners. And we were not only saying it, we were doing it. We were making it. We were making it so very much true. Our own Martin Carter, who sometimes would come out on the road, got beaten in 1978 for standing with a placard while he was languishing in prison in 1953 with your father and others. He said, this is a dark time, my love. All round the land, the brown beetles crawl about. The shining sun is hidden in the skies. Red flowers bend their heads in awful sorrow. Who comes walking in the dark night time? Whose boot of steel tramps down the slender grass? Is the man of death, my love, the strange invader, watching you sleep and aiming at your dream. There's nothing more profound. This is the dark time, my love, is the carnival of misery, the festival of guns, dark metals and tears. Everywhere the faces of men are strained and anxious. This is Martin Carter. He's in prison, but his spirit is free. And he's taking the language of the people and giving it back to them. And so when you speak to people in that language, they're ready to move. Walter Rodney used to say, when the drums begun to roll, it means that all people are on the move, shuffling their feet, staring into the open space, proclaiming and affirming their humanity, and say, this too is bad, and this too we shall overcome. And so, even when the politician and the political activists are speaking, they're really chanting. As Brother Walter said, grounding with the brothers and the sisters, because that's what we do. And if you're grounding with people, you can't speak a language that they don't understand. They created their own liberation language, as the Black Stalin says. He said, Calypso is liberation language. You could not speak in the language of the oppressor because you will find out what you're doing. And you create your own new languages, where it's jazz and the blues. The blues and jazz have no rules. And that's deliberate. Because if you create them with rules, you're not creating them for yourself. You mix it up so that the oppressor doesn't understand. Our own Rex Netterford say, when a people are oppressed, they go deep into a place where the oppressor cannot find. And when the oppressor turns his back, it comes flowing out. It comes flowing out. Whether it comes out as reggae or hip-hop, or calypso or high life or merengue, it comes out as a language that our people create and thus can understand. And so there can be no revolution, Stalin argues. There can be no revolution unless the revolution is guided by that language. And he makes that stinging critique of the Grenadian Revolution. Grenada, Grenada, the black man telling you, you teach him some lessons. Grenada, Grenada, the black man learn that whether it's the ism from the west or the ism from the north, unless that ism comes from your bosom, there can be no real revolution. Grenada, Grenada, the black man learn that if you want to sustain a revolution, you got to get a nuclear weapon. Stalin went into an analysis of the Grenadian Revolution in that song that is peerless. It is an analysis that takes us into spaces that we were reluctant to go into. He was a friend of Maurice Bishop. He was a friend of the revolution, but he felt that the griot had to tell the revolutionaries that when you leave your culture at home and seek to build a revolution based on ideology, an ideology that is not native. Oh, Guyana, they called him the homegrown socialist. And as a little boy, I couldn't understand what they meant. Later on, I realized that what he did, that he took knowledge from other spaces in the world, but always seeking to align that knowledge with the native knowledge coming from our people. Hence, the homegrown socialist. You know, they call our George Headby the Black Bradman, because Bradman is supposed to be the great white cricketer, and Headby the great black. And C.L.R. James would argue that Bradman should be called the Black Headley. We'll take Guyana as the homegrown socialist because we understand what he was doing and trying to say to us.
Right. As you're talking there, you know, we're still going to Guyana. We're still going to Guyana, but it's just so much that comes up in terms of accountability. I want to ask, at what point, even dealing with this music and how, as you said so profoundly, you know, they take the work of the product of a people and make it a commodity. The question is, at what point do the people say enough is enough? At what point do those who are social architects, who have the rights of the indigenous people of the world in mind, say, well, no more? I think of what we learn in school, Maslow's hierarchy of human needs. And when I see these people who manipulate our culture and weaponize it like they did with gangster rap as a perfect example, they're not just doing this out of the blue. They look at our human frailties. They look at the things that we feel like we are lacking, and they play onto that. There's always been the case. We see that in Guyana right now. As we go to Guyana, we see that how they will come with trinkets at election time and give people a little bit of something. So that is what we expect from imperialists. The question now, to hold our own feet to the fire as those of us who claim that we are revolutionaries, at what point do we say, well, enough is enough? And what is it going to take for us to actually take that sentiment into tangible reality, where it's, because it's not about the odds. Clearly, it's not about the odds. Haiti showed us that it's not about the odds, right? Malcolm X challenged us to say, well, don't tell me about odds. When you look at the Viet Cong, don't tell me about odds. So we know, even though we got this big bad machine, this Western imperialist machine, you have spoken today, have demonstrated through history that it's the meek, not just that inherit the earth, you know, in a poetic kind of biblical sense, but that's a practical thing, because it's our culture that determines the trajectory of the culture of the world. So I'm asking, at what point do you feel? I'm not asking you to look into your crystal ball, you know, but at what point does the table turn where we say, well, we have this same ability to manipulate culture, to manipulate the trajectory of history, to use those elements that imperialists use with their big budget to make a profound difference?
I will answer that question by going back to the Black Power movement. Because the Black Power movement was talking about power. Was talking about a different kind of power, but it was talking about power nevertheless. And that we continue to do the work of the ancestors. We continue to do the work of preparing our people for that moment. Because as the Christians have taught us, we know not the hour. Bob Marley himself has said that we continue to jam in, and that he who lives, who fights and run away lives to fight another day, telling us about the tactics of struggle, telling us about the struggle being a process. Our own Frederick Douglass saying that freedom, power concedes nothing without a demand. But that demand has to come out of constant struggle. And so every day, you and I and others, we prepare the way, we provide platforms so that our people can give voice to their inner feelings. Our people create their own platforms with a mic in front of them. They say things that some of us want to say but cannot say. But the question is power. And when we reflect on the Grenadian Revolution, we reflect on the independence of the Caribbean. And we ask ourselves, what have we done with those gifts that we have given ourselves? And I think that's where the problem has been, in the sense that we have strayed away from the foundations of our being, and we tend to conceive of power in the manner in which the slave masters and his descendants conceive of power. And that is what Stalin was warning against in relation to the Grenadian Revolution. We have to conceptualize power differently. And once we begin that process of conceptualizing power differently, we'll get closer to what you're talking about. It's a process. Surely in the 1970s and the 80s, in the black world, in the brown world, in the revolutionary world, we were trying to craft a new conceptualization of power. When Walter Rodney mounted the platform and he says, "People's power, no dictator," resonating from that simple slogan was much more than sloganeering. It was about conceptualizing power differently, and that remains our perennial challenge. Yes, we come up against those who are anti-freedom, but we have come up against them before, as you have pointed out, and we have overcome them. Why are we not doing today? Yes, the world is a technological world, but Bob Marley, in so much trouble in the world, he talked about technological inhumanity. We have the text there. We have the products there. And we have to grasp those texts and products, whether we are in the union hall or the schoolroom, whether we are in our farms, tending to our plans, so that we can feed our people. We must hold strong and hold aloft the banner of Ethiopia, as our countryman asked us to do. Hold aloft the banner of Ethiopia. And so we have to constantly remind our people, turn our people back to the source, Amical Cabral, back to the source. There are things that we cannot do because, as Stalin says, we have never created any nuclear bomb as yet. And they're trying to keep nuclear bombs away from us. But we have something stronger than nuclear bombs, and that is soul power.
Exactly, because the paradox is that our nature as indigenous people has always been about humanity, about welcoming. And sometimes that's what gets us in trouble. That's what has gotten us in trouble time and time again. So fundamentally, I'm asking, well, when do we learn that lesson? When do we learn that lesson, and without losing our humanity? It's a delicate balance. Because we don't want no nuclear bomb. Because that nuclear bomb is not just going to wipe out the enemies of our humanity, it's going to wipe out all humanity.
That's right.
It's going to wipe out all of our humanity. So that's the delicate balance. I appreciate you answering the question in that way. I was just thinking of even Dr. Leonard Jeffries, one of my godfathers. He was talking about Du Bois, that at the turn of the the previous century, Du Bois said that the key struggle would be the color line. And Dr. Jeffrey was saying, no, well, in the coming century, the century we're living in now, that it would be the battle for the African mind, MIND and MINE. And we're seeing that. So let's go to our beloved Guyana. Of course, I want to ask you to, let's not assume that anyone that's listening now really knows about Guyana. We can get into a conversation, and there's so much that can be said without being said because of our common. You're of an older generation than me, but we have so much in common in terms of what we've experienced. So as we talk about Guyana, let's, as you have that beautiful program, Politics 101, let's just kind of deal with Guyana 101, but from a perspective of bringing us up to speed on what has been happening in Guyana, as I said, a year in review, if you will. Where would you start that conversation?
Yes, brother, you know, Guyana is like any post-plantation society. We have all the scars of bondage to quote your mom and your dad. We have the scars of bondage still, fresh on our flesh. We are a post-plantation society in which our independence was interrupted by a prolonged colonialism. And inside of that process of delayed independence, labor was brought from Asia, from India in particular, and Madeira, and parts of China, to ensure that the plantation continued to run, because Africans had walked off the plantation demanding equal pay for their labor, to demanding more pay for their labor. And so indentured labor was brought in to prolong the colonial rule and to prolong ownership of the capital in the country. And so by the time we got to political independence in the 1960s, our country had become a place where different peoples from different parts of the world found an anchor. The Africans had built up the physical infrastructure. They had humanized the place with their schools and their churches and their culture. But other ethnic groups had come in. And as would happen whenever ethnic groups are placed in a foreign land, conflict arose. And so we've had to manage conflict between the Europeans and those who they enslaved, but also intra-group conflict, that is conflict among the various groups in our country.
I want to stick a pin right there just to insert Dr. Walter Rodney. As you mentioned the conflict, you know, it's important to, I know you would agree that it wasn't just as much an organic conflict as it was something that was imposed, you know, like, again, divide and rule. Like, for instance, as a farmer, my work is in the agricultural world. We have decided, one of the sister, I must hail up Sister Karen Washington, who really coined the term, or who raised the idea to change the term, rather, of this whole thing of food deserts. And say, well, it's not food desert, it's food apartheid, it's food redlining, because desert has a connotation of something naturally occurring, right? And so it's not that, it's that because if you say just food desert, then they would just kind of leave in the mind of most people that, well, naturally some people have more food than others, but that's not the case. So even as you were talking, I didn't mean to cut you, but as you were mentioning that initial contact with the African people and the Indian people, Dr. Walter Rodney, in one of his work, of course, and there's a video on YouTube for those who desire to do the research, where he talked about how from the very beginning, the meeting of these people, there was an external aggravation, if you will, that pitted these people against each other.
Very much in order, and a very important addition to the discourse. Certainly, the external imposition, the external intervention began, of course, way back into the Middle Passage, coming forward to today, that the colonials have gone in their numbers, but their presence in determining what happens in the country is very much part of the struggle today. And so we have had that impose divide and rule among and between the non-white groups in Guyana, principally the Africans and the Indians, and the Indians from India. And on top of that, it is the external geopolitical intervention that has continued along with the ethnic problem to determine the face of Guyana and the political content of our country. And so Guyana has found oil, destructive as it may be to the environment, is still a source of enormous wealth. The paradox that we must always confront, the Marxists will call it the dialectics, but we must always confront that that which brings wealth destroys wealth. And we confront that reality in Guyana. And in the initial stages, the struggle is how do the resources get distributed? How do the resources get distributed? That is the basic question in a society like Guyana. Oil wealth on top of ethnic conflict raises that question of the equitable distribution of wealth. Equitable distribution of wealth along the lines of class. Do we still afford all the riches to the wealthy and nothing to the poor? What about the ethnic distribution of wealth? What about the place of women within this whole context of the accumulation of wealth? And so those are the questions that are animating the political and economic landscape of Guyana. When you put all of that within the context of a winner-take-all majoritarian politics, in which one party wins 50.1% of the votes and gets 100% of the government, and that party is an ethnic party, then the challenge is, how does that ethnic party, representing just half of the population, how does it accomplish the task of equitable distribution of wealth? And so that is the question that we are confronting. The party in power draws its support from the Indian Guyanese community. It is a party that has strayed from its origins, its Marxist origins, and now have gone into a partnership with big capital, big foreign capital, but also big local capital. And you look at the budgets and they're all skewed in the direction of capital. And then what is left? The president walks around the country and shares out to its pet constituencies. No due diligence, no policies that are aimed at equitable distribution. And so as we end 2022, our country is gripped in ethnic anguish. It's gripped in class anguish. It's gripped in gender anguish. As the people look on and see the opportunity to raise themselves out of poverty being given short shrift by a government, and that those who are already rich are given every opportunity to take advantage of the new resources to make themselves richer. The more things change, the more we rearrange, everything remains the same. The more things change, everything remains the same. The world moves on, technology moves on. But the fundamental question of the equitable distribution of resources, it's not just a question of the ideology of the left versus the right. No, it's a question of a humanist ideology. If we in Guyana can use some of that oil wealth to liberate our people from poverty, their world would change, Guyana would change, our Caribbean would change. We have enough to wipe poverty from the face of our country. But as they did in the time of colonialism, they do today. They stand in the way of equal humanity. That is our struggle in Guyana.
What role do the masses of the people have in that? You mentioned the slogan, which was, as you quite rightfully said, was more than a slogan: people's power, no dictator. What role do the mass of the people have in the turning of the trajectory towards the empowerment of the people instead of the 1%, if you will?
The theory.
You and attorney Nigel Hughes, salute. You all did a wonderful, a beautiful job in the Politics 101 in terms of, for those who didn't know, I want to ask you to just share the information so people could tune in, but in terms of just uncovering, like we say, with receipts, uncovering some of these shenanigans that's happening in this new oil economy, and clearly they're just getting more blatant and more ridiculous now, but it's something that just didn't start with the oil economy, right?
Yes.
Yeah. What role do the mass of the people have? Is it just really something that, are the people still, I'm asking in a different way, are the masses of our people still empowered to actually make a change? Something that we're waiting for some Moses or something to help us with this?
Theoretically, they are. In a real practical way, they are not. As we know, we have to keep our people always on the move. And in the new world in which they are, those who struggled in the 1970s, in some respects, some of their children are doing better today. They've been able to take advantage of education opportunities and go on to universities and other places of high learning. And in that sense, they've become a new middle class. And so therefore, they're not as driven in the direction of revolutionizing the land as we were 40, 50 years ago. That, in a sense, the success of our own struggles are working against the struggle today. Wow. As you look around, the young people are earning more than I earned, and you earned, and Karen and Nigel earned. And so therefore, they have no time for struggle. They're enjoying the material side of life. And I would say the struggle is short of soldiers, in the sense that there's not a ready pool of young people that you can recruit to join the struggle, to do the backbreaking work, to do the work of public education and public advocacy, to do the work of the mobilization that needs to be done to keep our people ready, to go into the arms of the people, the bosoms of the people, and stay there with them and let them know that they have friends and comrades who are with them. You see, the struggle of the people must be carried on while the people are trying to survive, trying to put bread on their tables, send their children to school, earn a decent living. And so there must be these revolutionaries out of their own ranks who must be with them on a daily basis to say to them that you are the leaders of the struggle, and we are here to give comfort and to bring up the rear, if you will. That is lacking. It is lacking. And so programs like the one I am doing, they're meant to use where the people are, on the superhighway, on the internet, on Facebook, wherever they are, to speak to them and to speak with them, to learn from them and to help to prepare them. Because the new world in Guyana, the world of oil wealth and gas wealth, is something that they have to become attuned to at a cultural level, to understand that we bear the marks of the plantation and the marks of colonialism and neocolonialism. But in many regards, the face of the country is changing. Below the surface, it remains constant. But above the surface, there are changes, and we have to grapple with that. We have to let people understand that what looks like money is really not wealth. We have to remind them, in Bob Marley's words, in the abundance of water, the fool is thirsty. Because the people can be carried away with 100,000 Guyanese dollars, which is a drop in all the oceans put together. Because billions are going to the rich and the powerful. We have to do that work. And if we continue to do that work and we continue to look for that sweet spot, when we get to that sweet spot, the dams of oppression shall break, and the freedom spirit shall flow like a river. That is the day you're asking about. Folk wisdom says 2 morning more. It's not long in coming, but we've got to work for it. We've got to work for it. And that's the kind of work that we're doing.
Indeed, indeed. Marcus Garvey said it would take 24 hours. That's the other side of the coin, you know?
Yeah.
Not all a contradiction to what you have shared. And Marcus Garvey was not known for hyperbole.
Exactly.
But we've seen this in other places in the world, where it's just a matter of, what he said was 24 hours when people make up their mind that they're tired of the old way, the old paradigm, and something new is happening. We saw that in the Arab Spring and all these different places in the world, just in recent history, you know what I'm saying? Just to cite recent history, the use of the internet, the use of social media and everything, in a congruent way that changed overnight. Something that was bubbling below the surface for decades, at the right moment, it changed overnight. So we know that this is also possible in our country and anywhere where people are facing great tribulation at the hands of the few. We know that this is possible.
Yes.
So before we close, I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. I wanted to ask you, first of all, just to give us the details on how people can link up, with Politics 101 and your work in general, to tune in and to possibly learn something. First of all, educate ourselves in an ongoing internationalism, which is a part of the legacy that you people like yourself have inherited. This when they say no man is an island, we have seen this in practical ways in terms of the international solidarity that has made even some of the gains, if not all of the gains, that we have made even domestically very possible. So give us the details on how we can link up with your platform.
You can join me. The safest way is on YouTube. It's Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. Sorry, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. It's at 7 o'clock Guyana time, which means at this time of the year, it's 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time in the United States of America. And it goes for 1 hour, 7 to 8 Guyana time, 6 to 7 Eastern Standard Time. And you can get me on the YouTube channel, Politics 101 with Dr. David Hinds. And if you are the Facebook type, then you can get the program at the same time, live on Facebook at that same time, under the same title, Politics 101 with Dr. David Hinds.
Lovely. Ndugu David Hinds, Twilly, as we
Yes,
know, long time, a cultural general in your own right. And Raskofi says so, when I take back the talk, your works have gone before you. I want to seal up with reflection in our home village. We've talked about, we opened up talking about some of our people who have passed on. And so many people from our village have passed on. You mentioned Rastafari, and one person that I know you know is from your generation who just made his transition and was very the first Rastaman I lay my eyes on. First Rastaman I know. And then it could come Abyssinian, who we all know and love after that. Askari,
Brother
one
Scary.
he just made his transition.
Yes,
Any
he's gone.
on his life.
Yes, Brother Scary is the quintessential man of the earth.
Yes.
They say he made the best coconut oil in the village, and this is a village of coconut oil makers, long tradition. And when they say you're the best coconut oil maker in a village in Guyana, that's some feat. But I think what it signifies is that there was a man, a young man, relatively young, coming of age in the period of modernization. But he was not consumed by that modernization. That he continued to believe that the soil, the land, is the source of all spiritual and material wealth. And he spent his life on the soil, in the soil. He brought into his repertoire the drum and knowledge. Every time I spoke to Askari, I learned something. I learned something new. So Askari would come up to me to say he heard me make a speech or he heard my program, and he would say proper talk. But before he leaves, he would leave me with some wisdom. He was that type of person, really a real product of the soil. Gone too soon, gone too soon, gone too soon. But he has left a tradition. He worked at the museum. He spent
Yeah.
the last years of his life working at the Buxton Friendship Museum, thereby, founded by our brother Kwesi Easton. And so he has contributed to his community. He has left it richer. He may be disappointed that he could not stay longer to finish what he was doing, because he was always doing something new. But I am glad to have lived and to have shared a village with him. I've glad to have been of his generation, because my own life has been enriched by his exploits. Fly away home to Zion. One bright morning when our work is over, we fly away home. I also want to give my condolences to the Samuels family. You remember Carlos Samuels?
Yeah.
His mother just passed. Miss Waveney Samuels passed 2 days ago. She herself was, as those women of that generation are, they're pillars of a community. A couple of years ago, I was passing, I will always hail out to her, and this day my mouth tip, and instead of saying cousin Wavo, I said Wavo. And she said, boy, no, 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 no. Cousin Wavo. Turn back, go back at the roadside, and come back and say, Cousin Wavo, really instilling that you may be a big man. Your wings may have gotten a little bit bigger, but I am still Cousin Wavo. Profound. Thank you.
Yeah, man, real. The last time in this place I saw Scary, you were there. It was at the
Yes,
homegoing of my auntie Andaye. They're
yes.
coming, and it was a powerful event at Tipperary Hall, a very historical place in our village. So we give thanks for all of those who have gone before us. And as she said, the book that was written of her writings or put out of her writings, the point is to change the world. The point is to change the world. So we thank you, beloved, for the part that you were playing in that, for taking up that baton very seriously. And we're grateful. We're looking forward to more and more of the revolutionary spirit which comes from our village and from the meek of the earth, from all over this world, that is very much capsulized in the heritage of Buxton, Guyana, and has affected the whole world, from them small places that seem so insignificant. So we work, Dr. Hinds.
Thank you very much, Kofi, and continue to do the good work that you are doing there in Atlanta and the environs. Because when we link our works together, then the weight becomes somewhat lighter. And the Pan-African tradition and spirit continues to be relevant. And so what you do there, what I do here, what others do there, we put it as an old sportscaster used to say in Guyana, good things come wrapped in small packages.
Much
Bill Crumby, the indomitable sports commentator. Yes. Thank you, my brother.
Yeah, man. More love.